what millennials want in a space is they want the space to tell them how to act. And so we often think where people's hearts or connection is, that's where they'll locate themselves. So they'll go deeper in when they're more comfortable. And I laughed a few years ago when we had a puppeteer doing a sermon.
Cool.
And one of the scariest street guys who would often have some pretty interesting language, he just came and plonked himself right down in the front of this guy. All the kids were around them, and I just laughed. I've got this great photo of him just laughing his head off because it was a safe place for him and them to be.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Redemptive Family podcast. You know, over the last 6 weeks, we've been exploring simple relational ways of doing church and really asking the question, putting the why of church back into the centre where it belongs. Well, this is the last episode of our 6-part series. So if you're joining us for the first time today, I really encourage you go back and have a look at the episodes that have gone before this one. There's been some great discussions and some great information. So my name is Steve Hooper, and again, it's my privilege to be the host of this episode. And we've been talking to people who've been asking the question, help, my church is shrinking. And maybe that's you as you're listening in, and maybe you're saying, how can I get help to turn things around? Or is there hope for maybe a better future? Well, if you're thinking that, you've come to the right place. And that's what we're going to be talking about again today. Well, back in the studio with me is my good old mate, Howard Webb.
Hi there, Steve.
G'day, Howie. Good to see you again.
Yes, Steve.
Now, Howard is more than just a mate. He's also a colleague. Howard and his wife, Lynette, work for Love Your Neighbour. Leanne, my wife, and I work for an organisation called Family Life, both under the umbrella of Tandem Ministries. So check those out, both of those. But also Howard is an author of the book Redemptive Family and the Redemptive Family Church series. So we're going to be talking more about that later on, but check those out too at redemptivefamily.org. Well, also joining us today is all the way from Palmerston North is Lydia Read. Lydia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Kia ora, Steve. Kia ora, Howard. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah.
Kia ora. It's good to have you here. Yeah, thanks for making the trip up. Now, Lydia, I believe you juggle, you're the co-pastor of Hope Vineyard.
That's right.
Great name, by the way. I love that. You're a financial manager of your farming and property business. You're an accountant, leader of New Wine New Zealand, and a super cool grandma.
Thank you.
Now, is that your title?
Just as I walk in, it's clear.
Is that your title or your kids?
Actually, the grandkids, the Mokapuna, they call me Minnie.
Minnie. Oh, I love that. That's very cool. So I guess the question is, with all those things that you're involved in, what do you do in your spare time?
Actually, one of the things that Shane and I have been doing is learning a little bit of Te Reo. So let me just start by saying ko Lydia aho, and I'll just say here and now that our heart is he honore te atua I hukaraiti me warua tapu. And can I just tell a little bit about where we come from?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So ko Taranaki te monga, ko waiao te awa, ko oio te marae, ko Aotea te waka, ko meri kupa Taranaki te tipuna. And as I say, ko Lydia aho. So thank you so much for having us here.
Nā kia ora, nā mihi. Thank you, Lydia. Now, I understand you met your husband Shane 38 years ago by crashing into his car at a Youth for Christ rally.
Yeah, a little bit of information in the wrong hands, Steve, isn't it? It's all about that.
I guess more than anybody else, you can say you literally met by accident. Is that?
Absolutely.
So tell me more about that. Well, were you fighting for the last car park at a YFC rally? Or?
No, not at all. Actually, he was part of the setup crew. I was 15 years old. I had my full licence, had billets in the car. And it was literally a car park. I crashed into his prized vehicle.
Oh, no.
And half an hour later, he comes ambling out of the darkness. I'd been told he's a big guy. My mates were teasing me, said, he's got a fierce temper. Nothing could be further from the truth. And so when he told me that don't worry about it, just a few ripples all the way down the side of the car, I went for him because, attack is the best form of defence. And I said, what do you mean, you idiot? Take another look. A few years later, we're married.
Oh, there you go. Well, it must have been a divine appointment.
Absolutely.
So, that's wonderful. Well done. Oh, thanks, Lydia, and appreciate you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, our title for this episode is Shaping Our Spaces and Rhythms to Support Our New Culture. So maybe, Howie, you know a lot about this. Maybe you can frame the conversation for us.
All right, Steve. So it's been a great journey over the past 6 weeks. So, let's just retrace our steps a little bit. And really, everyone in church really wants the same thing, don't they? We want to have purpose. We want to grow in faith. We want to see our friends come to know Jesus. And each of us wants to be part of a family where we belong, where what we do matters, and where our contribution is valued. That's really what we all want. And really, the mission of the church is really simple and human. And certainly in our context, we keep mission really simple. It's befriend people. Invite them to come see the church family for themselves. Show them hospitality when they arrive. Wrap church relationships, wrap other church relationships around them. Preach the gospel and pray for them. Yeah. And so that's very human. That's very doable. And so mission doesn't have to be this big, scary thing.
And people are saying, that sounds too simple, but it works, right?
Yeah, it does. It really does. And so what we're talking about is relational, missional, disciple-making church. That's really what we're talking about here. And it's exciting to belong to. And if your church is dying, you really need to pivot from that, from feeling like we're dying and we're going nowhere, to life-giving church. You really need a change to become a life-giving church, because that's how you stop yourself from dying. And so if this is who we want to be and we want to live out our mission, I think we can do it even on Sundays, because, we're all here, right? If we're going to do it some other time, we're not all going to be here. So just doing it on Sundays, I think, is just part and parcel. We need to think about Sundays as just a normal part of life and not kind of box it off into some little corner. Now, of course, if this is the kind of church we want to be, and that's not who we are now, then we're going to have to change. And change is notoriously difficult, right? Culture change is just really, really tough. And so it's really important that the whole church be involved in a conversation about what is the kind of church we want to be, and what are the steps we're going to take to move from where we are now to where we want to be. And a quick plug for Redemptive Family. The Redemptive Family Church series can really be a catalyst to help you on your way. And so, check that out. But having taken those steps towards culture change, we need our structures and our rhythms and our spaces. We want them to support the kind of church we want to be. We don't want them working against us. Yeah. And that's why I'm so thrilled to have Lydia in the studio, because Lydia knows all about this stuff.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all.
So we met Lydia when we were just starting out at church at 126 and Point Chev, and she was just starting out with Hope Vineyard in Palmerston North, and we kind of flew down there and we kind of checked out Lydia's church, and we were kind of blown away by how amazing and classy and creative.
No hyperbole at all.
Not at all.
And her spaces are high. And so, just, I really think that our audience and our listeners today really need to get some wisdom from Lydia about this. And so, very nice to have you, Lydia.
So kind.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, again, thank you for coming and joining us. Well, last week we spoke about changing our culture. And as you said, how hard that is. For a lot of people, change is hard. But Lydia, maybe you can give us your thoughts on that, and how do we stop ourselves from reverting back to our old ways? Maybe we get stuck in the past. How do we stop doing that?
Oh, well, actually, I have to put a disclaimer in there. We haven't led church in another context, and so I even feel fraudulent sitting here in this chair. However, it has been true that over the last 7 years we've noticed that culture sets much faster than we thought it would. So our church became the place that all of your old couches came to die.
Oh, yes, and our church too.
And as we say, there's that sort of sense of we give our best for the least, and yet the old couches come to church. And so over the last few years, we've slowly exited the old couches and brought in nicer chairs and the crocheted rugs that held the bald spots. So it's pretty easy, I think, to revert to some old ways. And so we are constantly saying that actually this is a place of change, and that the only thing that doesn't change is the fact that we're a place of change, and the culture of that has been the culture of our church. And we want to be in a place where we trial things. We want to be in a place where we as the church leaders, Shane and I, really hold tightly on to the value that we're the holder of the why. So when we see people just walking in off the street and perching in the cafe space, as we are in the middle of a sermon series or whatever, we next week have brought the cafe space closer to the church, so that they're really embroiled in all that we're doing. You know, when we so we're constantly kind of going, let's change things up all the time, and let's live in this movement. Really, we absolutely love it. So other things, I think, that when we think about how do we stop reverting to our old ways, discussion. You know, Lloyd Martin, he wrote a book years ago which was called, I think, Two People, One Faith, or the inverse of that. And he said that it was shocking for particularly Māori, who were so used to doing things collaboratively, to walk into a space where things were top down. And so as a church, we are constantly in discussion. We're talking about why we're doing things, how we might do things. And I think the other thing for us in terms of not reverting to our old ways is just to remember that everything's spiritual. That there were two prophetic words that were given to us actually just before we planted the church, and intriguingly they were identical. When we were looking to go into actually another church and be part of that at a different time, the word was, don't forget that you will carry what they carry. And so we have learnt to land in the whenua. We've learnt to land in this place, knowing that we're incarnational in this spot, and really holding that as a high value. So I don't know. I think, as I say, we've only led this church, and I think it's a much harder thing changing a culture from something that was, and it needs a high degree of leadership, but for us, you know, that's our story. We constantly prayed the inner city of Palmerston North, and we said, Lord, what would it look like to have a place to call home and a people to call our own? And He showed us this place, and we hold that really seriously. And so we hold value highly.
No, that's good stuff. I mean, yeah, change is the only thing that's inevitable in life, isn't it? And it's not easy for everybody. But the good thing about this series that we've been talking about over these last 6 weeks is that it's not necessarily massive change that we're talking about that people need to get scared about. Sometimes it's just changing one or two little things. And we've talked about connection, and we've talked about our culture and our physical space in church. But how do they connect and how do they relate? So maybe if I throw that out to both of you, just to chip in on answering that question.
Yeah.
I guess in the workplace, for example, Steve, if what you're really looking for is a culture of cooperation, you're going to create an open space office, and you're going to shove everyone in cubicles, right? Because shoving everyone in a cubicle,
like a fishbowl,
it kind of works against what you want the corporate culture to be at. And so I think that principle is kind of true even in church.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You know, absolutely. I think, in terms of the physical space, we have learned that being monocultural is not an option. If you're going to be a church that, you know, if Jesus was walking our streets today, He would be highly relational. He would be winsome. There would be a woo about Him. And so we have been intent on creating a space that has that same thing, where people could be walking along the streets and fall into the space and go, I had no idea it was a church. And that happens to us all the time. Yeah. And so we're having to sort of think through our language of how do we describe what this thing is. And so we have a cafe at the front of our church that's open the 4 days a week. Outside the cafe will be some of the street guys, the homeless guys, jobless, who will be all sitting around outside. Inside we will have business people having meetings, possibly office groups having parties, young mums who are meeting up and that sort of thing. Further in, you'll find that there's a Bible study group. Upstairs there'll be an office, and right out the back there'll be either a play group or healing rooms or something like that. So the sense for us is that we've created a space that is both vertical and horizontal in terms of wealth and and a race and creed. You know, it's not monocultural in terms of lots of things all looking the same, but actually there's a real diversity, and that's how people are enjoying living.
Cool.
You know, so it's totally stepping into that that third space kind of sense of a place that's not work, that's not home, but I want to spend a lot of time there.
We know some churches, Steve, where from the outside they just look ugly. They look forbidding. They look unfriendly,
Uninviting, maybe.
Yeah.
uninviting, and it's really easy when you've been part of the place all your life, maybe, or at least years and years and years. You kind of stop noticing what everybody else is seeing, and sometimes just little things can make a huge difference. You know, take down that wall that just makes you look like a prison. Put a coat of paint on the outside. Think about a mural or something to just reflect on the outside what you hope people will experience on the inside. And so, I mean, it's sad. I mean, we know some churches that really are declining, and it's like they're not really hearing what people are telling them, that, you know, your place looks like a place to avoid. And they could just be doing some tweaks that could really change that initial perception, which could really be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we spend a bit of time making ours a beautiful place.
Yeah.
You know, Shane and I were at a plant shop the other day, and we bought some lovely trees and pots and things to take home. But actually, we do the same. We do the same at Hope Vineyard. You know, we're always just tweaking things and making it beautiful. And people walk in, and I think it couples with a sense of deep spirituality in the place, the rhythm of life, where we said, you know, when we're travelling overseas and we stand in the ruins of a place that for 2,000 years has been a place of prayer, and it feels like a holy place, a thin place. We go, what if spiritually we're constantly praying on this land, in this whenua, and but also in the physical we make it beautiful. And so people walk in all the time and go, what is it about this place? There's, you know, we're spiritual beings.
Oh, that's great. I mean, this is not just church. I mean, you talk about some buildings looking uninviting. I mean, we live in a cafe culture, and for some people in church, they think, oh, that's not that important. But actually, it really is for a lot of people. So for you, even saying the cafe is sort of, you walk past it to come in, you can grab your coffee or whatever. I mean, when I'm looking for a cafe, I might choose one that I want some sun, or I want one that looks nice, or I don't want that looks a bit dingy. I won't go there, or you know. So it's those sort of things. And we can do that for our church as well, to make it look inviting.
Absolutely.
And I guess the word that I was thinking of as both of you were talking about your church and your space is community.
Yeah.
People are there not just Sunday morning, they're there for all sorts of other things too. And it feels like this is a cool place to come. You know, I feel like I belong here.
Yeah. It's fantastic. I mean, we really held high and continue to hold high the values expressed in that 1 Thessalonians 2:8 verse, which talks about, you know, we loved you so much, and we're constantly trying to understand that deeper meaning of aroha in this land. You know, what does it look like to love people so much that we wanted to share not only the gospel of God but our lives as well, and that's winsome.
Yeah,
you know, people want to share lives.
It's good.
Yeah.
So we probably all know what it's like to be told, oh, you know, turn and talk to the people around you, and maybe we're sitting in a building that's got high back pews and we can't really even see the people around us, or you know, come to the front, we want to pray with you, and then you can't really hear anybody over the band who's playing rather enthusiastically. I know, I'm getting all excited about what they're doing.
A man of praise. Right there. Hold on, Steve.
I mean, have you guys had experiences in church like this where you're thinking, gosh, this just feels a little bit self-defeating?
Yeah, once or twice. Yeah, I mean, that would be true.
Yeah.
I think when I think about that, I think about the fact that Jesus wasn't one to ignore his environment. Do you know, when he went to Jairus' house, he put out the mourners. You know, when he went into the synagogues, he respected. You know, he did the norm of the day. When he went into the temple, he overturned tables. You know, and so I think it does matter. Your environment does matter in terms of our heart, which is to bring people to Jesus. You know, that's our end goal. And so, yeah, the self-defeating thing, I think we can get a bit more creative than we do sometimes. You know, do you have to be in the building? Maybe you could be in the park across the road. Maybe you could Matariki, we put a lamb on the spit out on the city centre pavement, and while we're kind of doing our thing inside, that's cooking, and then it's, everyone gets in and has kai together.
Sounds good.
It's great fun. 2 years in a row we've done that. I think we've set ourselves we've set the bar. We're in trouble now.
What are you doing next year?
But I do think that, we can be creative around what does it look like to, I think some of these churches that are cavernous and large and have got pews, I'm like, man, if we're constrained by space. And I think, well, if that was me, I'd be fairy lighting it, and I'd be shoving a great big, I'd forget the mush pit. Like, what about a playpen for the kids, and put all the seats around, and get a sound system that's loud enough to get over the hubbub of noise, and there's possibilities all over the place.
So many of our churches were built for a different era. And so we're kind of stuck with the legacy. A lot of us are sitting in legacy buildings that were shaped for a different purpose. If your building is shaped to kind of come in, go through a liturgy, listen to a sermon, well, what's your building going to look like, right? You're going to have like a raised pulpit because, the kind of preaching is really important, and maybe you're going to have a stage because the band's important for the worship segment. And honestly, our buildings were originally always shaped for the purpose that they were built for, right? So you can discern what the purpose of the building was by just looking at its shape. So perhaps we want to do something different in that space. We can't just leave the building the way it is, because now it's the wrong shape for what its core purpose is. We just recently had a big refurb at 126. It was a really old building, and the Baptists had come in, and they've done a wonderful job. Very kind of them, and so we pulled out all the old. There was a big curtains down the side of our auditorium with a bunch of junk behind there, old stage with tatty carpet tacked on it and whatever, and old cupboards, and then they just hung a curtain in front of all of that to sort of hide the mess. So we kind of cleared all of that out, and we
metaphor for life, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's right. Hide behind a curtain,
and the walls got scraped back and repainted and everything. And what we didn't realize is that stuff was doing a lot of sound absorbing.
Yeah.
And suddenly our space was looking beautiful, and sounds terrible. The echo in there is just unpleasant. And if you're sitting in the corners of the space, you can't hear what people are saying. The speakers just kind of, the sound is bouncing around the room. And when you're hard of hearing like I am, it actually is trying. And you can leave the space feeling exhausted just because of how hard it was to hear the whole time. Well, we're doing something about that. We're putting in acoustic panels in the ceiling and stuff.
That's good.
But the point is, you can't just leave it. You can't, because if you just leave it, sooner or later, there's kind of a balance point between people going, I want to go, and there's stuff I love. There's also stuff that I really find hard to deal with, and right now I'm not sure which one's winning. We need to decrease the kind of negative push factors, and we need to increase the pull stuff.
That's it.
And we really don't want our spaces to be working against us there.
So you're talking about removing distractions, maybe getting the work and be in and tidying things up to make them look nice. Or you guys have both recently started churches that are very relational. And as we talk about space and culture, and Howard, you've mentioned some things about what you've done at 126, but what are some good ideas if people are looking for, how can we make our church work better relationally? What would you tell them?
Yeah, well, I think that there is a real joy to be in a space that's set up. There's a missional integrity to a space that's set up well, where everything is prompting you towards the same thing, which is an awareness of the kingdom of God and a relationship with Jesus. So we in our space, I think in the early days at Hope Vineyard, we had 30 to 40% of those that called Hope home were either streeties or jobless, or that kind of, they weren't central in terms of the centre of society. And so it did require that we've had to learn some lessons, we've had to set up a space. So we've done things like used as many of our sort of sight, see, hear kind of visual cue, all those channels to have that missional integrity. So the big sign, which is I sometimes think is being a bit overdone these days, welcome home, So we have Nau mai haere mai ki te wakanga on our wall, which is welcome to your true home, We've got pillars that hold up our mezzanine area, and so during one sermon, people, if they belong to this place, went and wrote their name. And so now at the 7-year mark, we've got people who've been out of town coming back, and they go and find their name on the pillar. So a real kind of sense of belonging, and for us, we operate out of that motif of family. And so that missional integrity is all about continuing to press towards that. So if you walked into Hope, which is a retail space, it's a ridiculous space. It's 9 metres wide and 30 metres long.
Oh,
so
wow. Yeah.
Talk about sound problems.
Yes.
Mate, it's been a nightmare. But what we did right at the beginning was we plonked a kitchen right at the front. And so people, when they are walking into a family home, they know they can go to the kitchen and make a cup of coffee, and they do that. In our kind of dining room, which is our cafe, you're going to find lots of things happening, whether it's a food tasting or a wine tasting evening or a pottery or or a Bible study or so all of these things are kind of pushing towards that integrity of we're a people on mission together. It's interesting. My mate Andy and Lisa, he recently was reflecting on Hope Vineyard as a space, and he was saying, the temple was the centre of society, and so multi-leveled. On the bottom level, you've got all these. You've got the rich giving alms, the poor coming on a different day receiving. On other levels, you've got people who are apprenticing, learning crafts, and you've got musicians practicing, and then you've got God in the centre of it all. And that really felt for him very much like Hope. So many things that But what about you?
Yeah. So some of the stuff we do. So we put people's portraits on the wall. So we've got good sized portraits. And so as you walk in the door, the first thing you notice are the lines of portraits down the walls.
Very cool. Yeah.
And pretty much you don't have to be a member of the church to get your portrait on the wall. You just need to say, I belong here and I want my portrait on the wall. And we know that you're ready for that when you've transitioned from being a guest to being a host in our space. When you start acting like a host, we kind of go, do you want your picture on the wall?
I love that having
wow, I'd love that.
Sorry, I was just going to say, having been to your space and walked through that, and I remember you telling me the story about there's a couple of people who said, man, I've never had my portrait taken or put up on a wall before. And yet here it is on this line of, as you walk into the church, it's fantastic. Sense of belonging.
Yeah. So you kind of walk in, the kitchen's right there on the right, and everyone's is able to grab a drink and a coffee and make themselves a tea. And there's a big hubbub in there because we're going to be serving food later too. So then we've got our name tag boards, and so everyone wears a name tag. We wear a name tag every Sunday. We all wear the same kind of name tag. We don't have little sad paper ones for our guests because honestly, we have visitors every single Sunday.
Yeah, great.
Right? And so so we make them a name tag, and then we tell them, we're going to hang your name tag on the board, and it'll be waiting for you next Sunday. It's kind of like we are recognizing that they might be permanent, and we're kind of, you're welcome back, and we're going to keep your name for you. Our auditorium, of course, we sit around tables. We started off with couches and bean bags. We kind of had this multi thing where we kind of started at tables, and then for the sermon bit, we kind of moved to sort of couches and bean bags. But that just got a bit arduous for us, and we've ended up just staying around tables for the whole. For the whole time.
We've just brought some back into ours, actually, funnily enough. And it was a comment that one of a lady who is homeless and lives around us, she made a comment when I said to her during Matariki, I said, what do you think of the tables? And she said, I really like them because I can get to know people around them.
Yes.
So we've just kept half a dozen in the church, as we pack down. So, they're good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh,
You
no.
had more.
No, it's great. Plants. I mean, just plants can just really make a difference, can't they?
Yeah.
Well, and actually, funnily enough for us, we've just invited someone to be the keeper of the plants. And so she's done a fantastic, she felt like she couldn't do a lot in the church. She comes into the cafe every week, waters the plants, and ours are triffids, honestly. It's incredible. You don't want to sit anywhere for too long, they might strangle you. They're huge. And it's wonderful. So we've got lots and lots of plants and that sort of thing happening as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you position your seats for us was quite important. We had, what millennials want in a space is they want the space to tell them how to act. And so we've actually brought a communion table in. We painted a cross on the wall, but we have positioned seats in such a way that you can get through them. We've allowed seats that were further out so that in terms of even third space thinking, people want edges and ledges and escape routes.
Yes.
They want to be able to perch on the edge and go, oh, is this something I want to be part of? And so we often think where people's hearts or connection is, that's where they'll locate themselves. So they'll go deeper in when they're more comfortable.
Yeah.
So we have semicircular seating as well as tables. We've got stairs that people sit on. And I laughed a few years ago when we had a puppeteer doing a sermon.
Cool.
And one of the scariest street guys who would often have some pretty interesting language, he just came and plonked himself right down in the front of this guy. All the kids were around them, and I just laugh. I've got this great photo of him just laughing his head off because it was a safe place for him and them to be.
Yeah.
So those escape routes, the edges, the ledges, the edges, they really matter.
That's great. We've been talking about physical structures, but sometimes our rhythms are, and what we actually do to be intentional about our culture and to keep going. Are we getting blind spots around this? So we started a Monday morning review meeting of how did Sunday go.
Oh, good.
And so we actually started this during COVID, right? Because we moved to Zoom.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, that went not so well, or that was great, but what could we do to make it better next time? Because we just kind of recognized that being on Zoom, we just really had to be onto it. Otherwise, if it was going to be lame, people just wouldn't tune in again next Sunday, right? And so, and we've just carried it on. And so we have this thinking about reflecting on how did last night go and what are we going to do next Sunday? So learn from our mistakes, plan to do better next time, plan to mix things up. So as part of our rhythm, so everyone knows what they're going to get when they come. But what they also know is there's going to be some fun, there's going to be plenty of conversation time, right? So we meet for about 2 hours, and maybe 20 minutes of that you really should shut up while someone brings the message, but you can't count on it.
Yeah. Yep.
But the rest of the time is conversational time, and so that's part of our rhythm. It's not all just freestyle, free form, just chat. A lot of it's facilitated conversation where you're trying to achieve an outcome. But that's part of our rhythm. So people know what the rhythm is, but at the same time, there's some unexpected stuff. There's some fun stuff. There's something that where they leave going, wow, that was a fun experience. I really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to next week. So don't be boring. Boring really is sad.
We've just about need a budget line for chocolate in our church. We have created a monster, like the chocolate bars that get thrown around,
Oh, people come for chocolate, and food, you mentioned before.
Absolutely, food, lots of food.
And that debrief, I love that idea, because how many people are involved in the service on a Sunday, whatever happens on a Sunday, and then you don't really know what went well and what didn't go well because you didn't talk about it afterwards. So
that's right.
It's a good way to learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a proper professional way. I mean, we're amateurs, but that's well done.
There you go. Those are listening in. Yeah, we can learn from what Howard does at 126 by the amateur.
Absolutely.
We also
carry on.
we also send out an email every week about what happened last Sunday. Now, most churches send out an email about what's going to happen next Sunday, but it's always future tense, but they never talk about what did happen. So basically, most of our weekly email is about what did happen, with photos and affirming people. So we talk about everyone who did something in the service, and we kind of praise them and honor them, and we thank them in the email. And everyone, when they get the email, they're kind of scanning for their name. So we put all the names in bold too.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
so
they can find it.
Yeah. And also, and just seeing everybody have a fantastic time. It's like if you weren't there, there's maybe a sense of FOMO.
Yes, I get that.
Gosh, look what I missed.
Yeah.
And we're big on chocolate too.
Yeah.
And so basically, when it's sermon time, the consolation is we pass the chocolate round. So, sermon time is chocolate time. Coffee and chocolate, it's the love your neighbor mantra, and we've carried that over to church as well.
What could possibly go wrong when you got coffee and chocolate?
And we've got because we've got the cafe. The advantage of that is one of the is the coffee machine. So one of the things that we now do is whenever parents of preschoolers walk in, we just think it's a win right there that they managed to get there today. Because it's pretty hard. So for them, it's a free barista coffee or hot chocolate or whatever that gets taken to them as the service is starting, and it's great fun. Great fun.
Very cool. Now, there may be some people that are listening that are thinking, oh gosh, Howard, you mentioned before, maybe stuck in a building that was purposed for another era. Thinking, I'm stuck with the building that we've got, with the space that we've got. Now, you've talked about some practical ideas already, but is there anything else, if they're thinking, what can I do to make the best of our space, to make it more relational and conversational, like you've been talking about? Anything else to add?
Well, I think Lydia touched on something important earlier, which is have a conversation about it, right? Because you always have a few people with a vision for how things could be different, and then you've got a bunch of other people whose vision is about how it could all just stay the same.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a conversation about what it is you really want to achieve here, and get as many ideas as you can from the people who are going to have to be using this space. Building some consensus around what we're going to do here to change things is always a good place to start. Otherwise, you end up just causing friction, and it might end up not being so helpful. But honestly, chairs, tables. We went to a church conference a couple of years ago, several years ago now, actually, and there must have been about 250, 300 people at this big church conference, and they managed to put little scallops all the way through the hall, a little coffee table, and then a little kind of scallop of kind of 6 or 8 chairs. And so everybody in the space, and they had a lot of people in the space, but everyone felt like they were part of this little intimate group. It felt good. It felt really good. There's just something about a table, something about a coffee table, something about comfortable chairs. They don't have to be padded. In fact, we've got molded plastic chairs, which is helpful because some of the people who come along to our church have occasional incontinence problems, etc. And so it's comfortable, it's easy, they're light, they're stackable. Sometimes the right chairs, little tables, can really just do the trick. Of course, we eat around proper trestle tables. But you don't have to, if eating is not really possible for you, then think about what a little coffee table can do. It can really be helpful.
But I think also we, as church leaders, I mean, we're all bivocational. In fact, we often laugh and say, we got to the size of church where we were supposed to employ an administrator, and we thought, well, that sounds really boring. So we employed a barista instead.
Oh, that sounds much more interesting. Yeah.
But actually, as church leaders, we need to lead. At the end of the day, we consult, and I think some of that organisational thinking around, tell, sell, test, consult, co-create. Where are you in terms of that leadership kind of spectrum. And so we love to consult and co-create, but when that decision is made, we will lead it. So I love the fact that we are creative beings. We follow a God who is creative. And when we are confined by our space, there's an incredible hopefulness to how we might focus our creativity and collaborate around how can we make this a space that people want to be in, a space where they will find Jesus, a space where together we will reach for him and find him, because he's not very far from any one of us, you know. And I think that there's real hope in those spaces that might seem confining, but actually. So it needs a bravery, I think, to lead. And it needs that missional intent around, being the holder of the why. You know, why are we doing this thing? It's for this reason. And then people are, oh, yeah, right. Okay, I'm on for that. You know?
Yeah, this is good stuff. Lydia, we've asked this question to all of our guests that have been on the podcast, so I'll ask you as well. You may have some additional insights. But say someone's listening in, they've involved in a church that maybe used to have 100 people attending, and now it's sort of dwindled down to 30. I mean, what encouragement or practical advice could you give to them?
Oh, I just think that's a place of excitement. I just love it. When we were planting Hope, one of our biggest barriers, and we spent a long time with the Lord kind of wrestling with a couple of things, and he spoke really clearly to us. One of the barriers for me was who says that Palmerston North needs another church. There's already 60 or 56 or something at that time. And a friend of ours, Cindy, she said to me, well, who says that God isn't saying that there needs to be a church on every street corner? And I think a church of 30 can do things that a church of 200 or 300 can't. I think that that we can be so highly relational at a time where there are widows and orphans just all over our society, and what they need is connection. Jesus was he gave us a way. You know, our goal isn't eternal life. It's our goal is to be more like Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, and so really a church of 30. What is your goal? Is it to be 300, or is it to be Christ-like to the people around you and really significantly change the neighbourhood and the streets that you're in? And that's where we park. And so we love it. And as I said to you, we had a seating problem on last Sunday morning where we didn't actually have enough seats. So we're back to that thing where people are sitting on the stairs, and we love it. So we put cushions on the stairs and we live with that. So a place where you can really get to know one another's heart, where you can really, every week we welcome the newcomer to church, which is implicitly saying, if you're sitting here and you're one of our regulars, it's a safe place to bring your neighbour and your colleague, because they're going to get treated like royalty here. Yeah. So 30, lots of fun.
Oh, that's great advice. I thank you so much for sharing. So I guess what I hear you saying is make the most of what you have. Sometimes we look at numbers and we think, oh gosh, we judge how successful we are by how many people are coming, when really a church of 30, you're right, they can be more relational. They can be more intimate and talk about, real life and
absolutely
things that are really important.
I mean, Shane and I said right at the beginning of this wild and adventurous journey that that we couldn't live or die every Sunday, and so we just can't emotionally do. So we have to sit a little bit above that, and so if we're getting all excited about the one that came in, and we still do, our hearts can't help but just but then they don't come back next week. Then we're just an emotional roller coaster, and actually that's not what God's calling us to. Yeah. So that idea of working with what you've got, loving the person around you, being radical in that, being courageous and adventurous in that. That's how good.
Fantastic. But Lydia, thank you so much for coming all the way up from Palmy to join us in the podcast. We have a little gift for you. We'll love your neighbour.
Not one of your books, is it?
No, well, would you like another one? No, it's a mug with your name on, see? For those that are watching, a Redemptive Family mug, and some other goodies in there. But thank you so much. We appreciate you sharing your heart and your passion and what you've done in your church. I know it's going to be helpful for a lot of people who are listening in, thinking, well, what do I do? Well, you've shared some practical things that you've done. So, really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
It's been great having you, Lydia. Thank you.
Well, before we go, Howard, I'm sure there's listeners out there who are just dying to know more about your Redemptive Family book and also the Redemptive Family Church series. So if they're thinking, here we are as a church, how do we get our whole church on the same page with a fresh vision of how we can be church together? I mean, this has got to be the resource for them, right?
Well, I'd hope so, Steve.
In your unbiased opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. So here's my big book, and it is really based around 4 big ideas. We're a family in a place on a mission together. And this book gives just some of the theological and kind of scriptural basis for, why we argue for the 4 big things. We also have the Redemptive Family Church series, and this is the handbook that goes along with that. So in here is 5 weeks of devotionals. There's a small group study in there. There's a survey at the end of every week that gives some feedback back to your church about what you're thinking about that part of the journey. And at the end, hopefully you're going to have a church-wide conversation. And Love Your Neighbour loves facilitating those, and we've done this for many, many churches. And we've seen churches just really turn themselves around by embracing a new, more hopeful vision of themselves that can take them forward into the future. So if you want to know more about this, just go to redemptivefamily.org and be in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
It's an absolutely wonderful book, I have to say, Howard. I had it sitting on my kitchen bench, and a church leader came past and just said, this book has been fantastic for him as he's taken some time and flicked through it and landed in it. And he said it's really sort of pulled together a number of threads for him. It's been quite useful. I feel like just quoting back some things. I've got my copy all well thumbed and underlined, and feel like quoting back as a wise leader. How would we ever want to see it? But it's good stuff. It really is. Yeah. Thank you for writing it.
Thank you, Lydia.
As I said, I think previously, I knew Howard before he was famous. In fact, I was one of the many people who were lovingly reminding him, have you written your book yet? And so finally he has. And, I can overwhelmingly endorse that too in terms of having read it myself. And our church right now is going through this Redemptive Family process, loving it. Absolutely. I've seen some shift in the way that we think already. And having been involved in a couple of other churches, just helping in the background with you guys that Love Your Neighbour, and seeing what it's done for their church. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine recently who have done the Redemptive Family a year or more ago, and they said, we have new people, we have visitors at our church every week.
Wonderful.
Sort of thinking, where do they come from? What's happening? But they're having new people every week, and wonderful. I think it's probably because of this, Something's happening, people are attracted to that. Yeah.
So to our listeners, Steve, I'm sure you would say the same. Thanks for being on the journey with us. And Steve, thank you for being such a wonderful host. You've been great.
It's been a privilege for me too. And I love you guys, what you do, and it makes a difference. And this is the final chapter or the final episode of our 6-week series. I'm sure that Love Your Neighbour team will be putting out some more material like this, so keep an eye on the space. If you haven't gone back and listened to the other episodes, feel free to do that. There's some great content, some great discussion, and if you're looking for hope for your church, it's the best place to be. Have a look, and you'll find some stuff that's going to be good for you too. So, thank you guys. Thanks for being part of the journey. And bless you all for joining us. Thank you.
Redemptive Family is a podcast by Love Your Neighbour, recorded by Campfire Studios and produced by Toby Palmer. Our intro music is Jazz Brunch, and outro music is Carpe Diem, both by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Our ad music is Chiefs by Jahzzar, Jahzzar. It can be found at freemusicarchive.org. Special thanks to our guest Lydia Read and host Steve Hooper from Family Life. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to like and leave a review. We always love reading them. And lastly, for more episodes, resources, and hope, head to www.redemptivefamily.org. See you there.